Edition of the SFDC Academy live stream. Peter, what are we talking about today?
Well, we're talking about Dreamforce 2020, or what is now known as DF2U.
And at what
Which
time did you have to get up to watch the keynote, Peter?
Well, my alarm went off at 4:15, so I rolled out of bed at 4:15 and jumped online. So the good thing about working from home and doing this from home is you can do that at 4:15, and it's not that hard. Well, with coffee, it's not that hard. So.
Yeah. So we're going to let's rattle through the big announcements from the event. Things that we learnt new today. Obviously, there was a big announcement earlier in the week that played a part that we'll wrap up with. But let's start off by chatting about Hyperforce. Peter, what is Hyperforce?
Well, first time we heard Hyperforce, actually, this morning. I went and Googled it to see if there was anything more out there that we could find out about it. And I found out that it's a Power Rangers forum, by the way. Just don't get it confused. They talked about it as being the re-architecture of the platform. And look, we've seen this, well, heard this a couple of times over, the last couple of years, probably 10 years all up. So I'm not really sure, and it was very scant on details. There was no doubt about that. But it seems to be more about having a more scalable public cloud platform, about local data storage. So maybe it's another deal they're doing with AWS or maybe another provider. That would be interesting in itself. There's a lot of maybes. We just don't know.
Yeah, so I'm hyper skeptical, shall we say, in that we know that Salesforce has moved to using AWS in the past 3 years, I would say. I'm sure that they have been under pressure from some of the big customers who have said, look, we're all in on Azure, or we're all in on Google Cloud. When are you guys going to support that? And so I think this re-architecture, obviously it was a big piece of re-architecture to move out of their own data centers and move into AWS. And potentially, it's just a whole bunch of EC2 containers running whatever operating system it all runs on, which is probably reasonably transportable over to the other cloud stacks. So I'm imagining that this work that they've done re-architecting the platform is about just being able to run on those three major cloud infrastructures, or actually thinking about it as well. There's requirements in different parts of the world. China, for example, to use some of their cloud infrastructure that's in country as well. So this will probably give them that option to run in region. The big question for me is, how does that translate to you as a customer? Is it just that you get to choose your region? In which case, we know there's been challenges about moving existing orgs out of data centers and into these newer data centers. At a minimum, there's a queue and a wait period to have your org moved. And then is there, and this is the great mystery to this, is there an added value service to this where I'm already using other services from these public clouds? How does that, other data stores I may have, I want those to really, now that my Salesforce org is running on Azure, let's assume, I want those data sources to really play nice together, and whether there'll be some other connectors or other things to make that come to reality. So that's where I think the real value add is. Moving your org to your region, ticking some compliance boxes, it's kind of a must-have, but it's not very sexy. So if there's another layer to this that's really about integrating with the other cloud services you use, that's where I think we'll see the real value add from this. So remains to be seen how quickly they can roll it out. It's interesting, they say public clouds, but they don't mention which ones. So I imagine that behind the scenes there's still a lot of negotiations happening, and that we probably might not see this come to fruition until sometime next year.
Yeah. The other interesting thing was that some of the terminology used on marketing speak is what I'd refer to it as. single source of truth. I mean, that was mentioned a bazillion times, but it's actually in one of the screenshots there. So that was a buzzword, and look, that's one of the things, the holy grail that we've been looking for a long time. If this is something that's real, and it gets us to a point where we have a single source of truth across multiple stacks or whatever, then that's a great step forward. But we've been here before, so let's see. Hopefully, we'll actually see this through and see something come out of it.
Yep. So let's move on to the next one, which may be an enabler to coming up with a single source of truth, which is Einstein Automate. There's a couple of different aspects to this, and it's still a little bit of a mystery as to what it will be, but this is really looking to take automation and integration to the next level with, and this is the buzzword, AI-infused bots. I'm not sure what that means, to be honest, but we'll kind of wait and see. So the first thing to this is this thing called Flow Orchestrator, which looks tangible. We've got that screenshot up now, and looks interesting. The interface looks very much like Flow as we know it today, but it's clear that it can pull in, it's almost like it's a layer on top of Flow that can, as the name suggests, orchestrate a whole bunch of different things going on. Actually, and the other interesting thing, it's called Flow Builder. So is this the next iteration of Process Builder, perhaps, to kind of bring some alignment there?
Yeah, maybe it is. I missed that bit.
So yeah, this is more interesting and tangible to me.
Yeah, well, it's real. That's the first thing, because we can see it. Also, it's coming out now on the keynote. During the keynote, they mentioned it was into GA in summer 21, but when I was looking up some details about it, was saying it was coming out in beta in summer 21. So we'll see which version it actually does come out in. It does look good. And again, the wording around it is good. Still, again, we just don't have a lot of detail. And this is not unusual in these keynotes where we see this type of stuff come out for the first time. But I like it's that next evolution of Flow. So,
yeah. And when there was in one of the demos in the keynote where they sort of touched on this, there was a couple of interesting things I picked up. I don't know if you picked up. They talked about one of the steps was to natively create a PDF and send it to the customer. And so that sort of had me thinking,
that's interesting.
Oh, Conga will be interested in that little bit. So it'll be interesting if this brings in new capabilities of what steps you can automate as well. That would be quite cool. And they did give this example of this mortgage approval process as an example, and I wondered, because again in the live demo there was kind of the front end component to that, what a user applying for a mortgage kind of goes through, and it did look that potentially some of the IP they got through the Velocity acquisition was part of this as well, because Velocity had a reasonably nice configurable kind of GUI for creating workflows that combine front-end and back-end components. So potentially some of that IP has come in-house as well. The next component... Sorry.
I'm just wondering, is it going to stay in that Velocity stack, or is it going to be available across the rest of it? So again, we'll have to wait and see.
And is there an extra cost involved?
Yeah.
Will be the thing. This next one, and I won't claim to know enough about Mulesoft to really comment, but it was this Mulesoft Composer for Salesforce. So, as we're seeing on the screen, we've got this kind of animated GIF going through. This is steps being built in a Salesforce interface, which is nice, but always begs the question for me is, well, does that mean you get it as part of Salesforce, or you're having to pay for Mulesoft behind the scenes to run all the stuff? But did look nice in terms of a library of pre-built connectors and templates to easily automate integrations. This is something I've been interested in because Mulesoft looks to be a great product, but it's a sledgehammer to crack a nut in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. And it involves writing, code to define APIs and all this stuff. Having a nice point and click integration engine would be very cool, and that's what this looks like. So even if this could be a complementary product that maybe comes in at a lower price point, for when you need to build those simpler integrations where people use today tools like Zapier. We just build a basic workflow of steps that you go through, and that's what this is looking like. So even I expect this one will have a cost associated with it, but it's heading in the right direction.
I'm hoping it's going to be, if there is a cost, then it's hopefully at that lower price point. I'm expecting it will have a cost because it's got Mulesoft in front of it, so they're banding it all up together under that. I like the fact that there are some pre-built connectors there. In that screenshot, you can see there's NetSuite you can connect to and all that type of stuff. So yeah, again, potentially it looks good. We'll get to find out in spring 21 when it goes GA. So good.
Yep. So yeah, those here we find that's the bit I was talking about earlier. So this Omni Studio, and you can see in the screenshot here it says Velocity Digital Studio.
Yeah.
So this is the tech that they acquired from Velocity, and this wizard GUI on page is what's building the screens that the user sees, which they can be quite sophisticated and styled quite nicely from what I can see, as opposed to using a screen flow and Flow, which is kind of functional but doesn't necessarily look the nicest. So this would obviously come at a price, I'm sure, but looks quite cool as well.
It's wondering if it's going to be separate or it will be bundled up with some kind of Velocity stuff.
Yep. And
also,
here we go. Pricing and availability. Flow beta summer 21. Mulesoft GA early 21. That's interesting. So that's clearly much further along the development pipeline. And AppExchange and Omni Studio solutions already available. So maybe it's just making those Velocity solutions easier to get than potentially buying the entire Velocity stack.
Yeah.
Cool. So moving on to third announcement was this Service Cloud Workforce Engagement. What do we know about this one?
So this was a few separate things in there on the Service Cloud. So we've now got it's completing that Service Cloud offering, I suppose you could say. So there's service forecasting for Customer 360. There's omni-channel capacity planning. There's personalized agent engagement. A lot of it leveraging the Service Cloud Forecast is leveraging AI into Salesforce. Just trying to think back to the demo, and it was very early this morning, so I'm trying to remember what it was like. Can you recall what it actually covered off?
Yeah, well, it's the screenshot that I've got on screen now is kind of what I remembered, where you can see this talking about a work item forecast and kind of graphing, how many agents of what skill type you're going to need.
That's right.
At a certain point in time. Which I found interesting because it's a kind of a completely new area for Salesforce to get into. Managing what the workforce looks like has never really been part of the suite from what
it's
I
sort
can
of an
recall.
extension, I think, on Field Service Lightning, but more not in the field, but more everything else. So, so it sort of makes sense in that regard. I don't think. I think it looks like it's a standalone thing. You don't need FSL. We could be wrong. But yeah.
As you can see,
the capacity planning stuff I think is actually quite cool.
And then this other personalized agent engagement kind of experience seems to be a new aspect as well.
That seemed to be like an extension of what we've seen with knowledge and that type of stuff being served up in in the chat and all that type of stuff, using integrated my Trailhead as well. So yeah, a bit more of the same, just an extension, I think, of what we've seen.
Yeah, and it's sort of just dawned on me, you've potentially got a link there between my Trailhead and kind of the skill-based routing that Omnichannel has, for example, where it's kind of like, well, if you've completed this Trailhead, that proves your competence in this skill, and therefore you become available to route requests through. So maybe it's kind of tying together some of those things that already existed. Because it's kind of what you can see in this view, this all agents, and you're kind of seeing the skills that they have acquired through my Trailhead, I presume, and then the skills in learning. So that looks quite interesting if you're in running a large team in a service center. Well, there we go, a couple of New Zealand examples there to finish.
Yeah. One of the things I did learn is that Xero was apparently using it. At least I think I read that. But again, it was early this morning when I was doing this stuff. So actually, there you go. It's on the page.
Well, let's close this off with the biggest news of the week and kind of what dominated the start of the keynote, where Stuart Butterfield, the founder of Slack, was on stage with Mark Benioff, keeping 10 feet apart, I noted. So Slack is now part of the Salesforce family in a $27 billion mega deal.
Yeah, it's only a small deal, isn't it? But what will happen? One wonders. I mean, you can see the extension of Slack into Salesforce. You can see the gap that's there. It came across to me that this falls under Brett Taylor's remit. And if that's the case, then you can see an alignment with all the other stuff that they've been doing around Salesforce Anywhere, and this really gives them almost that final piece of the puzzle when it comes to mobile or being anywhere and being able to interact with Salesforce. So, but I think it's more exciting about what further initiatives they can do between the two platforms. And that doesn't include posting GIFs into Salesforce either, but hopefully that might be a sideline. I don't know.
Yeah, one interesting observation I had, which you kind of picked up on there, was that it was Brett Taylor that kind of announced this. That makes sense because it's an acquisition, but he was talking very much about the technology and what it means for the technology of the company moving forward. So it wasn't Parker Harris. Parker Harris, I don't recall being involved at all. So there's sort of a changing of the guard there, because we've known Parker to play a decent part in Dreamforce keynotes in the past few years, dressing up in silly costumes and the like. So that was interesting. And I know a lot of people see Brett as a potentially future CEO of the company. So getting his face out there on the keynote is a big thing. But then you bring Slack into it, and you wonder, if Stuart Butterfield sticks around, which I'm sure will be part of the agreement for a certain period of time. He's built an amazing product. Where else can he apply his skills within other parts of Salesforce? And obviously behind the scenes, they're formulating this big plan of how all this stuff sticks together. So I think his involvement in that roadmap will be quite fascinating, because he has changed the way people work. There's no doubt about that. And it's a good move for Slack. They'll get access to the Salesforce machine of sales. I'm sure the reach of Slack will extend greatly. The number of companies on paid plans will greatly increase as a result. So although it seems a lot of money for Slack's current revenue, I could see Slack's revenue tripling in a very short amount of time off the back of this. And then I guess a lot of people just see Slack as chat, but as you and I know through some of the integrations we've got in our Slack org, there is that next level deeper of actual interaction with systems. The Salesforce integration that exists today is good, pretty basic. You can pull up opportunity details. You can have approvals come through and kind of approve them from in Slack. But if you then think about Slack as a UI, and doing a lot of your operations that you would normally go into the UI of Salesforce, and suddenly you now do them all with Slack, that's where I think this is going, and that's what they're thinking. And it's funny, in a lot of ways, it's going back to the coder that prefers the command line, who can very quickly type instructions. And that's what people use Slack for. If you can interact with a system and say, update this data with this, bang, 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 and you're done. In a kind of low friction environment. So how the real deep integration goes here will be fascinating to see.
I think one of the things, being in the Salesforce space with acquisitions over the last few years, whenever something gets acquired, we just assume it's just going to be Salesforce. It will all be on the platform and all that type of stuff, and it'll look all the same as everything else inside Salesforce. But we've seen a change with that with Mulesoft. We've seen a change with Tableau. And I think Slack as well. We'll see these things, it will stand there as its own. And it may even go back another way. It will be, I'm a Slack customer using Salesforce. I'm not going to ever go into Salesforce. I want to be in my own interface and go that way. So will we see changes in how Slack operates and does things as well? It's a great partnership, ultimately. It's a great acquisition. It'll be interesting to see what comes of both sides.
Yeah, and touch wood, they won't ruin a good thing. I'm sure that's not their intention or plan, but Slack has a vast number of the organizations on Slack are using the free plan. You would hope that they won't just turn that off. That's where they've got their organic growth, is getting people on board for free, and then you hit that 10,000 message limit and you can't search your history, and you're like, oh, now I need to upgrade to the paid plan. And that's and then that's generally putting down a credit card. It's not calling an account exec. It's a different model, which I really hope that they keep, because then that could be the foot in the door. It's like, cool, now you're a paid Slack customer. That's the chance for an account exec to give you a call and say, well, tell me about your wider landscape and everything you're using, and try the upsell and cross-sell at that point in time, not way back when you've got someone who just wants to use it for free for now to try it out in a very low friction, low barrier to entry kind of way. So pretty exciting stuff.
So how did you rate the Keynote compared to the previous ones you've been to?
Obviously, it's very hard to compare. Quite different doing it this way. So if you compare to other tech companies and the way they've done their keynotes this year, I think Apple has set the bar, for the slickest, most sophisticated keynotes that they've done, but they've done them in a pre-recorded kind of fashion. That's how they've been able to add all the special effects. So this was, at least 50% live, from what we could tell. Looked like all the interviews with customers were live, as well as having some pre-recorded bits. So I thought they got the balance right, and crucially, didn't drag it out too long. I think I sent you a message when Metallica started. Is this the end, or is this just the intermission, and then we've got another hour to get through? And it's like, you said, no, I think this is it. And I was like, cool, that's actually a nice length. Some music to finish it off, and we're done. So I thought they did a really good job from that point of view.
Also, the first time I've ever seen Metallica. There you go.
Yeah. So you must have skipped 2011 and 2018 from memory for the 2 years.
I did. Actually, no, I think I was at 18, but I didn't go to the concert. So.
Yeah.
And also I found out, not a real fan of Metallica. So, but that's something for another day.
Excellent. Well, we will wrap it up at that point, and we'll get the chance to dive into some of these new features and announcements as more details come to light in the next few weeks. And we may even learn something was it called DreamTX? Was that the name we heard? That's
right, which is...
So that's all the breakout sessions that are on December 14 to 18, I think.
17, yeah. Well, 15 to 18 in our time zone, so yeah.
So look forward to... I'm sure there'll be some breakout sessions on those, and we'll be able to talk about these things in more detail.
Yeah, Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, pleasure as always, Peter.
Until then,
Talk more.
good
Cheers, everyone.
afternoon.